and then obviously to touch on the different philosophies of the two domains. So yeah, let's get started. So I'll start with Jean-Marie, and obviously Brian, if there are any interesting things that you want to interrupt us with, please do. Is Jean-Marie there? Have we had him on just now? Jean-Marie is on holiday, so when we were chatting a second ago, he was showing us pictures of the beach, which he might be able to show us just now. I see that.
Can you hear me?
There we go, Jean-Marie. We just can't see you.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if your camera's turned off.
It's not on my side, it's on your side.
Okay. Christine, can you maybe have a look at that? Just 1 second. There we go. We got you. There we go.
So,
nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
I think we'll start with that screenshot because everyone says Burgundy winemakers work very hard. I have what you do, but I mean, if you maybe just swivel your phone around and show everyone where you are.
Well, I knew I was giving conference with my friends from South Africa. I knew I would have to find the sun, and as you couldn't find it in Burgundy for a few months, I had to drive all my way down to Bordeaux. I'm a little bit south of Bordeaux. I'm trying to turn it so you can see. So this is where I am at the moment.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Yeah,
sorry,
so we appreciate you interrupting your holidays. So thanks again, and I gather you've sort of running away from Burgundy at a time that's the growing season's a bit tough.
Well, I think it's been tough since beginning of April. It's been a very challenging growing season until now, and the road to harvest is still very long. I think everybody in Burgundy is really exhausted with the growing season, but it's from the biggest battle sometimes that can become the best rewards. So it's one of those vintage. I'm tempted to say it's superstitious, but it's one of those vintage in one. So the legend continue like 2011, 2001, 91. Not this year's growing season.
Yeah, so you say pretty similar to those vintages, and it's not going to be easy, but I suppose there's still some time to go. So let's cross fingers.
Yeah. Well, look, harvest will be late September, so it was good timing for us to spend some time with the kids. We haven't had a chance to take a single day of holiday last year, so we had to make it.
Well, that's great. Jean-Marie, what I wanted to do was, I mean, a lot of people on the call tonight have actually met you when you kindly came to South Africa and joined us to do some tastings, and some of them haven't obviously met you. But I'd like to obviously go through just a bit of the sort of things that make Fourrier special from a winemaking and vineyard point of view. I know that you obviously took over from your dad in the early 90s, I think 1994. You'd obviously spent a bit of time overseas and then obviously famously working with Henri Jayer. And from those early 90s to now, you've obviously catapulted yourself in the domain into sort of the upper echelons of some of the finest Pinot in the world. And it obviously didn't happen by fluke. And it'd be great to maybe just get an idea of just broadly maybe a bit of your winemaking philosophy, and then a bit about what goes on in the vineyards, and then we can maybe go on to the 18 vintage for you.
Well, I would probably start by the fact that my father kicked out Mr. Parker from the cellar mid-80s. It was 85, 86. And we lost all our customers. And
Jean-Marie, what was that? Parker said that your father should have used more new wood or something like that.
exactly, that was the era that Mr. Parker was promoting new oak for old Burgundy, which to me um, was a nonsense because it was just cutting trees of 300 years old to use them once. So well was the respect for those trees? So that's why I've never been using 100% yoke since I took over the domain. But we lost all our clients my parents used to work with. And when I took over the domain in 1994, coming back from Oregon, I realized that I had no customers. So when I started to make wine, I made it with very simple ideas, which was if nobody buys the wine, I'll have to drink them. So I like to make wine with drinkability, with the simple definition for me is that a great bottle of wine is a bottle of finish empty. It's not about the score or trying to impress anyone. It's just trying to get in integrity and honesty what the land has given through the grapes into a bottle and sharing it with people. And maybe it was not so fashionable during the 90s in the eyes of wine critics. And thanks to wine lovers, which have discredited this politic of lots of new oak. Yeah, I'm tempted to say that for quite a few years, I was the new upcoming something, the new upcoming star. I'm not young anymore. I'm not upcoming anymore. But I just like the story of life where basically I've been consistent with myself and with my way of making, and I'm not changing for any fashion of the moment. I just want to have a natural curve like all producers of Burgundy used to do for themselves. Following the trend is not making sense because by the time the wine is drinkable, the trend has already changed.
And I mean, Jean-Marie, but your style is so consistent through the range from the Bourgogne Rouge right up to your Griot Chambertin, and it's a style that for me, I mean, I love it obviously, but it's perfumed, it's elegant, it's high toned, it's so sort of attractive and so easy to love, and it's different to other wines. And how do you do that? I mean, I know there's not much, there's 100% destemming, right? And there's a bit of that on that fermentation side, which you, I think, believe gives a bit of that high-toned fruit and things like that.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think for the entire range, as I like to believe in the potential of complexity from each plot of lands, I think I look at it as children with different potentials. And as the father looking after those vineyards, it really is the idea that I'm going to give them the same education. I'm going to give them the same chance and care to details from entry level to top wines. Then the soil after that will reveal their complexity. So that's why I want to be consistent from entry level wines to the topest range of wine. And that's a very important thing for me, that you can crack a bottle on Tuesday night without feeling that you break the bank. And I'm happy to make some Bourgogne Rouge, very well made, and having some Grand Cru wines that you can drink after 15 years with friends on Saturday night. So it's important to take on board wines for every situation, but also for people of every generation.
Yeah. No, and I think the other thing that makes your domain and the sort of that much more special is you very lucky to have vineyards that are generally all very, very old. I mean, I don't know what your youngest plot is, but I mean, it's generally all your vines are old, so which is always a good thing, provided obviously the vineyards are nice and healthy. What is sort of the age on the vines in general? I mean, just to give everyone a bit of an idea.
Well, the youngest one is Bourgogne Blanc, which is 30-year-old, but for the reds, the youngest one is 65 years old. So it was planted before an era we was talking about clones. It's all selection macel. So which gives very small berries and gives a very nice ratio of skin to juice because you don't need to be to push the extraction by winemaking. It's just the fact that there's so little juice versus so much skin that you have a natural concentration on the reflection of terroir. But going back to also your comments earlier about all clusters and stems, when I took over the domain in 1995, I've experimented 30% stems in an era where the phenolic maturity was not optimum because the climate was very different in the 90s compared to today. And for the last 2 years now, I'm gradually using around 20% stems, but I would destem 100% and then re-add 20% of stems into the tank to absorb like a sponge the excess of phenolic maturity because the wines are becoming too rich with too much color and too much structure, and I tend to lose the mineral character. And I think we can use at the day of today the stems to absorb a little bit some of the excess of phenolic maturity. The best example I would give is probably the wines of Domaine de Montille made by the father in the 90s, where it was 100% old clusters. You can see the wine was very light in color, very pink, and you know that with stems you can lose 30 to 40% of colors. So it's our new challenge with global warming today. How do we preserve the mineral character? Because we tend to reach high sugar level, drop of acidity before we even reach phenolic maturity. So it's all those components, which is like a puzzle. Basically, to resume it, this is a phrase I've heard 3-4 months ago that I really liked. It's just to say that this job is an internship of 40 years, and I've only done 20 so far.
No, well, I suppose with these last few vintages, with let's say all the sun, 18, 19, 20, and then 21 maybe being very different, it's all these different things thrown at you, which I suppose is normal for winemakers, I suppose, around the world, but maybe they've been fairly extreme. And it's quite interesting in terms of what you mentioned about the stems. Because I think historically you were always around 20% from a new wood point of view. Has the wood, are you looking to sort of maybe change anything because of the global, the hotter vintages from a wood point of view, or are you going to keep that fairly consistent?
No, nothing is written in the marble at the moment. That's why we have experimented for the last 4 years now. Also aging some wines in amphoras because they can, in ceramic amphoras, we can do the same brewing exchange than a barrel, but without bringing any tannins from the oak. The idea is not to do a specific cuvée, amphoras, or marketing things behind it, but my first observation after 4 years, which means it's only 4 times so far, was in a blend at a level of 20% amphoras and 80% in barrels. This seems to bring a length to the wine that we are losing with the excess of maturity now. The wines tend to be a bit shorter in mouth. And the amphoras seems to add more length and more mineral character into the wines. Maybe in the future it could be 25%, 30, 45%. I think if this year we don't have a huge phenolic maturity, amphoras will have no interest at all. But it's a part of the question for vintage where we have too much phenolic maturity.
Yeah.
Having a percentage age under amphoras. I think you guys in South Africa and I know in Australia, sometime, especially for white wines, people are aging a percentage in stainless steel barrels So, I think everybody is experimenting and exploring how we keep freshness and purity in wines today.
No, well, I think it's fascinating because a lot of the questions or the conversations we have this side with friends and clients, it's people are following the changes in Burgundy from a temperature and all the, the cliched global warming. And it's the interesting part is to know what's being done about it, not what's being done, but how is it being sort of navigated in the winery, in the vineyard, because it is something that's obviously very sort of, I call it something you're not particularly used to. So it's quite interesting. Amphora. So did you use in 18, 19, 20, did you use a tiny bit more amphora in 19 than 18 and more in 20 than 19?
At the moment, we are still experimenting.
Okay.
So we have an increased amount in it, but I'm thinking of it really at the moment.
Okay. Sorry, carry
on,
Jean-Marie. Okay.
No, I was just saying it's this road to experimentation, which is never easy because you make wine just once per year. So it's trying to guess. And what people often think about global warming, how does it impact the vineyards? But one of the parameters which people rarely think of is how it impacts the temperature of the cellars. Where the temperature in winter in the cellars is not as cold for as long as it used to be. So, for example, the aging in barrels of the vintage has shortened. Sorry, I've lost you.
No, we got you back. We got you back.
I was going to say sorry, I've lost it.
No, well, I'm just keeping an eye on the time, Jean-Marie. One of the things, obviously, that we're busy handling at the moment is the 2018 vintage. I mean, we've briefly touched on the fact that it was sort of the start of, call it the solar vintage. If you could maybe just give us a snapshot how 2018 was for you up in Gevrey with all your vineyards and how you found it.
Well, overall, it was not a very complicated growing season. We had bud break mid of April, no real pressure with disease. Quantity of bunches was beautiful and quality was there. So it definitely in before COVID era, I would have said the vintage to keep for a long time in the corner of your cellar. In the day of 2 days of COVID, I'm tempted to say you have to drink it, but it makes you happy. It's a vintage a little bit more square tannins, but without being too aggressive. It's not too aggressive. It's quite round. It's got a bit of volumes, but it's definitely a beautiful vintage. But with no any challenge specific regarding growing season. It was just what I would classify as holiday vintage. Growing season easy, winemaking was easy, kids was great at home during the élevage. It was really fantastic vintage, 2018.
But you still think, obviously, at even the village level, but at the Premier Cru and right up to the Griot, these are probably, there's enough stuffing and substance in the wines to also benefit a long time in the cellar from an evolution point of view.
Oh yeah. I think they're definitely not lacking of structure, and it's part of the questions of today is how to keep the freshness, the purity, and not making something too square, too aggressive. I remember I'm coming from an era where Pinot never had enough body, never had enough color, never had enough structure. And today it's the absolute opposite. Is vintage like 18s, you have to walk out of a fermenting room to avoid punching the cap too often. You become your worst enemy because you think I have to do the best from those grapes. So you always want to do more. While actually, when the raw material is fantastic, it's just like when you have the right vegetables, and the quality is perfect. You don't need to make a crazy cooking with spices and salt and pepper or anything. The taste and flavor is there. So don't try to make it more complicated than this. It's really beautiful vintage.
Yeah, no, we're all looking forward to it. And one little technical thing, Jean-Marie, before we maybe swap over to Brian. One of the things in the winemaking that you adopt is obviously bottling with a higher level of CO2.
Yeah.
If you could maybe just quickly take everyone through that, because obviously there's the odd phone call that I get where someone's drinking your wine and there's a bit of spritz in the bottle, and I'm because you've taught me well, I tell them very quickly, just decant it for 20-30 minutes and it's absolutely fine. There's less sulfur in the wine and all that. So if you can maybe just take everyone through that part of the process.
Yeah, very briefly, it all started from as I was saying earlier, I don't know if I'm going to sell the wines, and if I don't sell them, I have to drink them. I am personally sensitive to headaches with sulfite, and that philosophy of preserving the CO2, I do not add some CO2. I just preserve from the natural fermentation and the fact that I use very little or no new oak. It's a natural preservation of carbon dioxide, but the CO2 evaporates from 15 degrees Celsius and above. Every degrees it goes in the glass, double the speed of dissipation of CO2. Why do I have this philosophy? First of all, because I believe that wine has been made for more than for nearly 6,000 years for different reasons, but people didn't use any sulfite for many centuries. The CO2 is a natural preservation key for aging of a bottle of wine. But I also believe a lot in what Jules Chauvet, who was a doctor and enologist in the 60s in the Beaujolais, used to say. It is not the free sulfite, it's the total quantity of sulfite used by the winery when the grapes come to your door, through the aging in barrels, through the bottling, and it's plus amount of sulfite, which combines with the molecule of the wine. You taste the wine is beautiful, but when the wine goes into your stomach, the pH of your stomach is lower than the pH of the wine. And the sulfite, the combined sulfite, really becomes free sulfite into your stomach. So basically, the less you use sulfite during the entire process of making wine, and the less stomach problem or headaches you're gonna have. But in order to balance this, it's by preserving the CO2. And actually, one of the interesting key things of today, CO2 is an acid. Why does people at restaurants usually like to drink sparkling water instead of still water at the restaurant? Because the gap between the wine and sparkling water is not that huge. It's more refreshing. You have a lift up of acidity. So I do not have any CO2. I just preserve what Mother Nature gives me. I'm not an extremist. I don't load or put any CO2, and I don't want to make wine with zero sulfite. I believe in balance in two things. CO2, you just need to decant. It's going to evaporate. And if you're not on a rush to enjoy this bottle, usually the last sip will be better than the first one. It's a wine which opens with time. A wine we've made with sulfite, the first sip is amazing. You can drink the wine straight away, but the wine didn't have a huge evolution by the end you finish the bottle. So that's why I believe CO2 is one of the potential key for aging of wines, on top of the structure of the wines, the tannins and the acidity.
No, it all makes sense, and it's a great explanation. Thanks, Jean-Marie. If you wouldn't mind staying on the line, Jean-Marie, I'm sure there'll be one or two questions at the end after we've chatted to Brian. But I'd also see Some people you've met before. Dean in Somerset West is drinking one of your Gevrey Village 2002. I see Paul is drinking a 2013. So there's some Burgundy being drunk in South Africa tonight. So good.
Oh, thanks. My heart is with you.
Thanks, Jean-Marie. We'll chat just now. Brian, how are you doing? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
There we go. Welcome, Brian. Nice to have you, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
You're not on holiday.
I'm not on holiday. Yeah.
But, only the guys from Gevrey.
Oh no, they're not at all. I think everybody in the entire Rhone Valley is stressing out right now. So I think we're all in the same situation, and being able to take advantage of getting away a little bit does everybody a little good, huh? That's for sure.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you, and always nice to chat. Yeah, you and Jean-Marie, we always appreciate our time when we over there visiting. Always amazingly insightful visits. So it's just great to be able to use this sort of format to sort of spread the word a bit further to a lot of the clients and friends who obviously can't travel at the moment. So thanks. Brian, so tell me, when was your first vintage when you joined Etienne at de Montille, and how did you get from America to Burgundy?
I started in 2009 at Domaine de Montille, and when I moved over to France, my wife is Swiss. She's from Lausanne. So we kind of made a little bit of a compromise, and my compromise was I wanted to make sure that I was able to stay with the varietals that I had been working with in America. I came from William Siam and Kilpin in Sonoma Valley, and I basically wanted to continue to pursue Pinot and Chardonnay in its greatest sense, and that's obviously why I came to Burgundy. And I propositioned myself in a good way to domains that were primarily at the time focusing on organic and biodynamic farming, and that was my experience in America, and that was what I wanted to continue to learn and focus on with the two varietals, Pinot and Chardonnay. So 2009 was my first vintage over here.
Yeah, well, I think Etienne was lucky that you propositioned yourself.
Fully clothed, huh? Fully clothed. Pull that up.
So, Brian, that was 09, and I think their first vintage that they were fully biodynamic, correct me if I'm wrong, was 05, is that right?
Fully biodynamic was 2012, we were certified.
Certified.
Yeah.
But it started before you arrived, I think.
Yeah, for sure. The idea, Hubert de Montille back in the day, I want to say it was in the late 80s that he moved away from pesticides and herbicides to give context. So it wasn't a for what Hubert did back in the day. He was not too much different than what Jean-Marie was saying about a lot of processes with the vinification. He saw things as an observer, as a farmer. He saw things that he didn't necessarily like or agree with, so he wanted to move in a different direction. And it was more of a decision that was going to be made on his observations as a farmer to then make the direction for the domain. And the idea with that is to, I think we all want, and like what Jean-Marie was saying, I think we all want to represent the soil, represent the hand of the winemaking in a very light fashion to ultimately have the terroir express itself. And by that, what I mean is that you can do many things to mask certain characteristics, and by having the light hand, by having a perspective, a natural perspective in your vineyards, as well as having a good, pragmatic, natural perspective in your cave, hopefully will translate into wines that are more transparent. And by transparent, I mean expressive of their terroir. The expression of terroir can come from a perspective, a style, a house style that is completely different. So those two sides of things, Hubert de Montille, back in the day, he would destem half of his fruit, and he would use whole cluster in the other half of his fruit on every cuvée. And that was his way to express terroir, part of the growing, the plant material with the microclimate and the soils. And that was his perspective. An interesting thing in Volnay is you have Lafarge, you have de Montille, you have d'Angeville, and we all have different perspectives on how to represent terroir and different winemaking styles, but yet hopefully all of our wines come across in a pure fashion.
No, well, I think that you touched on what I was going to ask you next, is I think Hubert's wines, it sort of was more, I suppose, call it an old school, fairly traditional style, where the wines took some time to sort of come around, which I suppose these days it's sort of harder to sort of stick to sort of certain philosophies like that, with people maybe drinking wine a bit sooner. But again, the sort of purists want to be able to bottle wine from specific vineyards and showcase what these special plots are like. So I mean, if you had to sort of pinpoint one or two things, that sort of main change of, let's say, the old school Hubert wines to what's happening now, is it just, would you say it's sort of small nuance changes that have sort of more sort of put the spotlight on the vineyards, or not good or bad, but just sort of things that have changed? It might be a lot, and tell us.
Oh, I think what we've been accustomed to drinking as well has changed. Our palates have changed. So stylistically, what we like and what we enjoy to drink has changed. I think if Etienne was here, he would say that he doesn't have an interest in making wines like his father made and drink them 30, 35 years later. That rusticity, that quality that you get from the wines from those days that's just not a palate pleaser that we've become accustomed to in our palates and what we've learned. What we've changed at the Domaine, I would say, is we've become maybe a little bit more pragmatic in the use of whole cluster. Yes, we do use certain cuvées that have 100% whole cluster. However, those cuvées have a tendency, those vineyards are 80, 85 years old. There's great lignification. It's on a good terroir that can handle the use of that plant material in the cuvée. Other vineyards that we have that were planted 50 years ago might be a perfect time for a whole cluster, but the plant material just doesn't really warrant and manage itself to creating a complement to the complexity of the wine. So we will not use that plant material in vinification for a whole cluster. So we are maybe a little bit more pragmatic today in our choice of plant material for the whole cluster vines and that cuvée. For instance, we make wines that range from 1/3 whole cluster to 100% whole cluster and everything in between. And it completely depends on the growing season and the health of the vineyard, the plant material, and the growing season.
No, well, I think that's when wine and when we're there tasting with you, that's one thing that stands out. I mean, the range is impressive in terms of obviously the vineyard holdings. There's amazing vineyards that you guys work with. And it's always for me to try and remember the previous year. Was it 30% whole cluster or 45 or whatever it was? But the point of that is that it's very precise and obviously thought through in terms of what those vineyards can absorb or give in terms of how you make them. So I think that's, for me, as the wine consumer, the importer, I think that's a big difference as opposed to sort of a blanket method of how it was done back then to something that's, I think, much more fine-tuned in terms of really applying something to specific parcels to try and generate or try and put the best thing in the glass from that plot of soil. So I think that's cool.
I think we have also more tools to work with now than we had back then. I mean, I think the wines that were being made back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s, it's super impressive when you have just an absolute brilliant bottle of wine. You know, we are the spoiled generation. We have all gone to school. For viticulture, and a lot of people have either viniculture experience, whether it be in Australia, in America, or wherever it might be. So we have all these different tools in our tool belt or golf bag or whatever you want to call it. And you don't always use them, but they're in the back of your head, and you say, I remember when we did this, or I did this, I haven't done, you know. So all those experiences in life and the sharing that goes on now within the communities is pretty extensive, and it's super helpful in many, many capacities, as far as dealing with the terroir, as far as dealing with the growing season, as far as, you know, is dealing with everything. So we're lucky we have as much information as we have right now, so that we can work as pure as we can and stay as focused in our perspectives and our concentrations, whatever they might be, however extreme they might be, to make as good of wines as we can possibly make, with the challenges of climate, with the challenges of, you know, everything that goes along with that. So
no, that's cool. And Brian, one of the other things, obviously, Etienne made, there was a fairly big acquisition not so long ago of Chateau de Puligny-Montrachet, which I think added another 14 odd hectares to Domaine de Montille. I might have that slightly wrong, but I mean, you guys are just less than 40 hectares now, I think, in total between the two estates. And I think it gives a nice lead into maybe discuss both colors, because obviously with Jean-Marie, I mean, he does make a really good Bourgogne Blanc, but the majority of what's happening at Domaine Fourrier is obviously on the red side. But I think with you've sort of got you've got a really nice feel for sort of both sides, and maybe just to give everyone an idea of how things sort of transpired in 2018 for the whites, and then obviously for the reds, because it's obviously two different conversations.
I guess to start off, I would say a big step Etienne made in 2005 was to purchase with Domaine du Jacques, with Jeremy Sess up there, the Thomas Moya parcels in the Côte de Nuit, which provided the domain with about 3 hectares, which is fantastic, because, to be fair, the Côte de Nuit this year is looking, compared to the Côte de Beaune. So I think Jean-Marie is going to be happy with that. As far as the disease pressure is concerned, as far as the fruit set is concerned, the Côte de Nuit is definitely faring much better than our typical, you know, our scenario down here in the Côte de Beaune. And then obviously in 2011, the winter of 2011, 2012, the acquisition of Chateau de Puligny. So the Chateau de Puligny ultimately brought it, like you said, almost half of the surface area. So we have 36 hectares in total right now at the domain. And it provides a diversification, and call it a protection in some ways, with dealing with a lot of the situations that have been going on over the last few years. This year, it's not advantageous, as the whites are significantly lower. I'm kind of anticipating between 10, 15, and 20 hectoliter per hectare, depending on the parcel where it might be. So significant change from 2018. where the reds are, I think we're going to fare a little bit better globally across the map for the domain. Leading into 2018, I think what we got really lucky with in 2018 was we had a wonderful growing season that had the ability to ripen up the amount of fruit that we had on the vines in 2018. So 2018 was a very generous vintage, and we were still feeling the tail end of repercussions of the 12, 13, 14, and 15, and then 2016, the frost. So 2018 was our first breakout, super generous vintage from those years. And fortunately, we had the warm growing season, the healthy growing season, where we didn't have too much disease pressure in the Côte du Beaune for the whites, that had the ability to ripen up the fruit, but not necessarily make the vintage a viscous, alcoholic presentation. You still had really good representation of acid. We had good length and persistence in the whites, which is it's you want to call Chardonnay a noble varietal for that exact reason, that she's got the ability to be grown in any part of the world and still have super good qualitative components. And here, that's exactly what we're seeing here in Burgundy in 2018, as well in 2020. The chalky characteristic that has come out of the 18 whites, despite the extensive warmth that we had in the growing season, is super impressive. It's almost like it's a soft, elegant tannic profile of the Chardonnays that I feel like is lovely for 2018. So on one side, and on the other side, you have the Pinot Noir that once again, we had a vintage where we were generous on the fruit side, so we needed the warmth to ripen things up. It had the ability to get everything nice and ripe, really well structured, but also hold on to the acidities and hold on to the profile, the classic profiles of Pinot Noir that we're looking for in Burgundy. So the vintages that have been warm, we've been very lucky that we've had a generous fruit set, a generous crop to be able to carry us through and have the wine profiles to become, as we're seeing them right now, to be the classic characteristics of Pinot and Chardonnay.
Thanks, Brian. I think when we tasted the 18s, one of the conversations we had at the time, if I remember, it was obviously we were talking about the sun and the influence of sort of that on some Burgundy vintages, and is it going to affect terroir and all these things. And I think then we spoke about sort of the vineyards. And when we tasted through the wines, it was exactly what you said. I was waiting to taste wines that were maybe a bit softer, or the acidity was a bit lower, but all the wines were fresh. The acidity was stunning on both colors. And then I think I said to you, how does this work if you've got all the sun, and how do the vines still do this? And you'd mentioned something broadly linking something to the biodynamics and the health of the vine and its ability to potentially be able to just give more than you think it will give under these challenging conditions. So I don't know if on the biodynamic side and sort of maintaining acidity and the health of the vine, and what you could maybe say or comment on that front.
Oh, I feel like what I can say is that we're still operating in a good window. And yeah. I hope that this goes back to some of the experimentation that has been discussed about today during this period. We've done some stuff in the vineyards where we've planted some cover crop during in our vineyards. So we're just working underneath the vines and keeping those clean while we're having a nice cover crop during the growing season, and to retain moisture, to retain biodiversity, to retain a certain level of health in our vineyards, especially spots that are very much sandy limestone vineyards that have a hard time with that do a very good job of reflecting the warmth that has been happening over the last couple of years. But we did this in 2019. We did this in 2020. It worked out great. We've done it in 2021, and we have a year that it's absolutely, you feel like you're in a tropical rainforest. So that's part of the whole experimentation and the direction that we're trying to work together and go in to keep the vineyards healthy, keep your vines healthy in a way that they're going to reach a level of stress that we haven't necessarily seen until these last, these years where things are becoming, winters are less harsh, there's a little bit less moisture, things are slowly drying out. That trend seems to be happening. The years, I remember in 2011, I had my shirt off at the end of January, hitting PKs in the vineyard, making sure the PKs were getting planted in the vineyard because we didn't know how dry we were going to get. We wanted to make sure that certain repairs were being done in the vineyards before it got too dry in certain locations. So, and this was already in 2011, after the summer of 2009. So, which is following 2005 and 2003. So you start to see these patterns that kind of start to fall into place. So you have to anticipate, you have to start changing your perspectives and start changing your philosophies, not necessarily making major alterations, but being able to adapt to situations, just like Jean-Marie was saying with his amphoras. It's the same kind of philosophy where he's not going to go night and day to all amphora, but he's going to start playing with it and feel how it affects certain parcels and how it might impact other parcels more than other parcels. I'm speaking for him, and I totally shouldn't, but that's
That's what he said. That's what he said.
So in the end, it's we're putting our toes in the water in so many different ways, and so many variables are changing so often, whether it be vineyard, whether it be cave. We talk about the cellar temperature of the cave. Here at de Montille, I make wine in two different caves. One cave is 3/4 underground in Putigny, so there's a higher water table, so you can't go too low. And the cave here in Meursault is 4 meters underground. So of course, I'm super spoiled with the 4-meter underground cave, and I have to be less reactive than, say, the cave in Putigny, because the cave in Putigny last year at this time, if it wasn't climate controlled, would be at 18, 19 degrees, and this year it's scratching to get to 13, 14 degrees and it's running at 150 humidity. So there you go. So those are just everything. If you are too reactive, and I guess that's one of the roles of the job, is to know when to do something and know when to not, and take the right steps when you can.
Well, as you say, you're lucky to have all the weaponry and the knowledge and I suppose equipped to sort of best handle when these curveballs get thrown. So we're watching and tasting with anticipation each year to see what's going on, because we've got a lot of passionate Burgundy lovers here, and everyone's sort of, one of the conversations is sort of what's happening with the vines and sort of hotter vintages and things like that. So Brian, one quick, I'm just looking at the time, we've sort of got 5 minutes, and I want to do, there's 1 or 2 more questions, but if you had to maybe pick maybe a red and a white through the de Montille range, 2 wines or 2 vineyards that you love working with, you don't have to say it's your favorite, because I know that's never easy. So maybe just 2 vineyards on the white and red front that you love working with, and why you love working with it.
Well, what I can say to everybody who's out there viewing, I think as clients, you are in a great period where you're going to see some super interesting vintages with 16 I'm going to speak for Domaine de Montille, 16 being a little bit more rustic of a vintage and more of a classic Burgundy vintage, and 17 being super crunchy and fresh fruit, and you can crack a 17 any time of the day. And it's just like, okay. 18, we start to step into a level of a seriousness that is a little bit more concentration, a darker fruit profile, which is it has an ageability, which is fantastic. And then you back it up with 19, which is starting to get back to a more of a classic, a super elegant vintage. And then 20, wow, so you're in a fantastic window to see domains, to find the domain that you love and run with that domain, because we've had some really great vintages behind us. So that's one super thing to have that for the next couple of vintages coming out, with working with the great domains down in South Africa. So that's a nice
Thanks
thing.
for that snapshot. That's a great vintage snapshot. Thanks.
There's wine to be able to purchase too, because of the availability. As far as vineyards that I love working with, I'm all about acid. I'm an acid fan. We pick our fruit based on the acid profile. I have a phenolic ripeness snapshot in my head. Once the fruit stops burning my mouth and it doesn't hurt the sores that develop in my mouth during harvest, I look for a malic tartaric profile to go for a certain level of phenolic ripeness to then be able to use that for our whole cluster profile in the wines. That being said, I like limestone vineyards that have chalky backbones and chalky characteristics to it, and chalk like chalk as in champagne kind of profile. So I love working with Pommard Pézerolles here in the Côte du Beaune. I like working with Torre, Nuit Saint-Georges au Torre in the Côte de Nuit, because of the sandy limestone profiles that those wines give. And there's two vineyards that are complicated to vinify in the sense that they're still precipitating calcium, more calcium than our other red profiles. And they tend to have a reductive profile at the beginning of the aging process, which is, when reduction is kind of managed well in the reds, it can be a winemaker's friend, just like CO2. So it helps you for that longevity of things. So Pommard Pézerolles, I'm going to go on there. And then, I love Meursault. Period. I love the diversity of the Meursault vineyards. They have, each one of them has their own identity. Each one of they're so site specific, grower specific, and they really seem to represent each domain's hand. And I love that side of things of Meursault. So I'm going to give the whites a blanket Meursault.
Blankets, that's fine. Blanket village for the whites, Pézerolles for the red. And I will say, it's the first time we've heard a winemaker saying he's an acid fan. Could be misinterpreted, but I'm sure everyone on the call knows what you meant. No, thanks, Brian. That was awesome. I'm looking at, I want to just throw the last question past Jean-Marie, which I'll also ask Brian, just to end with, I don't want to say controversy, but something that always people are asking about at the moment, and I think it's an appropriate question with the two of you. What do you got? Pommard Pézerolles. There we go, Brian. Nice. What vintage? 18. There we go.
I figured we're
very appropriate.
And it's raining outside. It's raining, so it's perfect.
Well, Jean-Marie, I just wanted to end off. There's obviously, and we've spoken at dinners and things like that, and I think having both you and Brian on is perfect, because I can then ask this question easily. But I think that Burgundy, where it is now, a lot of people who started buying from us in the beginning have noticed some sort of fairly significant changes in, I suppose, demand, and then as a result, price, and things sort of being brought out of reach of certain people. And I think Fourrier and de Montille have been two domains that have been very, very sensitive to that, and whatever sort of increases that have happened have been very sort of calm, tame, and realistic. But that sort of isn't really an example which, let's say, everyone's following. And I think it's it's an interesting time, and I suppose with all that's happening in Burgundy, it'll be interesting to hear what you think, I suppose, of the near future of Burgundy and what's happening in terms of spiraling prices and demand and things like that. Where do you think it's gonna end up, Jean-Marie?
Look, I think what has really changed over the last decade for me is look, we have such a long-term relationship with great domains that there's always been Domaine Fourrier, great domains, final clients who are enjoying the wines. But the reality in global scale, now you have often more than 2 intermediates. It has gone up to 4 intermediates between the domain and the final customer. It has, in a way, artificially given a growth to a new benchmark of prices. And this new benchmark of prices has generated an inflation on the value of the land. And the value of the lands of today are to a level that I cannot even consider buying any new lands for my children. The problem is even worse than that, is how am I going to pay the inheritance tax for my kids to take over the family domain? And the reality is the cycle of life makes that you have usually 1-2 children, and there is a sister who has 1 or 2 children. And if you are unable to grow your business, you know that 2 or 4 kids are fighting for a garden of 10 hectares where there was only 2 people before. It's never any happy ending. And we see stories happening in Burgundy, like in other places. This heading to the fact that the world is globally today not 100% trustful into the banking system. Everybody is trying to see where can you invest, where can you put your money, what will it be safe. And Burgundy now, you know, some of the toppest Grand Cru, we are starting to talk about 36 million euro per hectare. I want to make, who would buy a business that it's going to take you 70 years to pay back for? So I don't know. It's kind of scary, but I'm not an optimist person thinking that we will be able to keep for much longer the land in the hand of artisans, producers. We are gradually leaving the cycle of what Bordeaux's been living 30, 40 years ago. But maybe it's a cycle, maybe I'm going to be wrong, but I think that the biggest proudness of Burgundy is to revendicate making wine from the heart by artisan people who are devoted to make wine with imperfections and perfections, but they are the way they are, just like an artist would do a painting with its entire freedom to make it. You like it or you don't like it, but it's been made by a free spirit. And we're going to gradually move towards these loss of free spirit. And that's what I'm scared of for the future of Burgundy and for our children. And that's why several producers, and Etienne's done that, and I've done that last year. Also, I've expanded a little bit in Australia. And we're all trying to expand where there's still a logical payback for our investments, but which will give us the stability and have some income, because as the climate become unstable, if you have some income from wineries from the other side of the world, then it will help us to preserve our family legacy in Burgundy.
Cool, Jean-Marie, thanks. Brian, that's the last question. You just to say, I agree.
I was going to say that was beautiful. It was very well put together. I think, I don't think anything more needs to be said. It's a little bit of a spiral that's happening, and I think it would be sad if, like Jean-Marie said, if the next generation cannot take over from the current caretakers of the land, of the family property, of whatever it might be. So I feel for that situation.
Yeah, well, it's good food for thought for everyone, and there's certainly some wine to drink in the meantime, and we obviously just cross fingers that the right things happen over the years, and it's something that's very close to our hearts and everyone's hearts, that we want it all to work out, whatever that may be, but in the right sort of way. So I'm just looking at the time, and as I say, we just gone a bit over, and it was meant to be just an hour session. So yeah, that's sort of us for this evening. So I think we managed to squeeze quite a bit of good info in, and really great opportunity to see you, Jean-Marie and Brian, and just to say a big thank you to you guys for joining us. And we really look forward to seeing you in Burgundy whenever that may be. I don't know when, but hopefully soon. And hopefully everyone that joined us, thanks to everyone that joined us. I see lots of people pulling some corks tonight. Seeing in the chat there, so thanks for joining, and good session. Thanks, Jean-Marie. Thanks, Brian. Look after yourselves. Good luck with 2021.
Thank you. Our heart is with you in South Africa and what you're going through, and we look forward to see you soon in France.
Absolutely. Yeah. Good luck.
Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good evening. Cheers.
Ciao.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.